Friends, the March of Living in Canada is perhaps the most successful contingent of marchers that attend every year. We're sold out every year. 250 young people go on the March of the Living. We're also the most organized community of all the contingents that take place from around the world. Much of that is due to my friend Ellie Rubenstein. Ellie works day and night tirelessly, effortlessly, on behalf of the March of the Living, on behalf of the recovery surviving community, on behalf of so many Jewish efforts. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce my friend of 35, 40 years, Ellie Rubenstein.
Thank you, Rabbi Zines, Honored Consul General, Bill Gleed, and all the rest of the distinguished guests here, and of course, especially the rest of the survivors. Let's give a big hand to all the survivors who come out here this evening. And Rabbi Zines suggests we ask all the survivors to stand for a moment, just so we can recognize them. So please stand for a moment, all the survivors. Another big round of applause. Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is go through the book very quickly, maybe in 15 minutes or maximum 20 minutes, to give you some of the highlights of the book you've all received. And the book, Witness, Passing the Torch of Holocaust Memory to New Generations, is very similar to the exhibit you see around. So almost everything I'm referring to in the book will be on the exhibit walls as well. So if you open the books, you turn to the page Table of Contents, you will see in the right-hand corner it says Interactive Book. And this means for the first time ever in Canada, we published a book where if you download this app called Digimark, you can actually put your smartphone over the page which has a picture of the survivor, a picture of the righteous among the nations, or a picture of the liberator, and will take you to their testimony on the Spielberg website or on the March of the Living website. So this is the first time it's ever been done in Canada. There's a hidden QR code on those pages, and this brings the stories to life, and I will show you how this works throughout the book. So if you look at the table of contents, the first thing you have is a message from His Holiness Pope Francis, which is on page VI. The Pope and I are good friends. We golf every week together. Just kidding. We're actually tennis partners. No, just kidding. There was somebody who knew the Pope. And just so you know, it's not just this Pope. If you look at the exhibit, we have a story from Pope John Paul II, who of course came from Wadowice, Poland. And during the March of the Living in 1990, I was on the march, and so was Jennifer Schneer. Jennifer Schneer's father and mother, Harold and Helen Schneer, were in Rome in 1990 on Holocaust Remembrance Day, meeting with many other people, meeting the Pope. This Pope was an incredible Pope, incredible friend of Israel and the Jewish people. And when he was standing in front of the Pope, he said to Pope John Paul II, "You know where my daughter is? She's marching from Auschwitz to Birkenau on the March of the Living." And the Pope responded, "I know all about the March of the Living. God bless your daughter, and God bless the March of the Living." And that's one of the stories in this exhibit. So we have support from two popes, which is pretty nice. So if we go through the book, there's a number of chapters in the book that refer to the general history of the Holocaust, because you know that many people reading this book for the first time, which by the way is now going to be translated into many languages, French and Spanish and Hebrew, and Dutch, so we've got a lot of interest in the book around the world. There's just a general overview of the Holocaust for those children who are not familiar with the history. But let me give you an example of some of the interesting things in the book. If you turn to page 13, for instance, what do you have on page 13? A picture of Elie Wiesel, how he was in 1945 when he was liberated from barracks in Buchenwald. He was basically skin and bones. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you have a picture of Elie Wiesel the way he looks like today. If you take your smartphone and put it over the picture of Elie Wiesel, you will see Elie Wiesel standing in Auschwitz-Birkenau on the 1990 March of the Living. And he starts telling a story. And he says to the young people, "Forever will I see the mothers and the fathers and the grandfathers and the grandmothers and the teachers and the children. Who has the strength to cry for them? Where will we find the tears to cry for them?" And then he looks out in the distance as if remembering a story from a long time ago, and he says, "I see a young girl. I see a young girl about to tell a story, a terrible story from the Holocaust." And then in front of thousands of people, he shakes his head and leaves the stage. He could not finish the story. Elie Wiesel, the most eloquent spokesman of the Holocaust, himself could not find the words to finish off the terrible story he was remembering. So that's one of the moments you'll find when you put your smartphone on that page. Let me move forward. I want to move to page 27. As I said, I'm just going to run through this book very, very, very quickly. There's only a certain amount of time. I'm reminded of Woody Allen's joke about, he read War and Peace. He said, I sped read it, War and Peace. It's about Russia. I'll try to do a little better job than that. So we have on page 27 a story from Lisa Grushka. She was 15 years of age when she went on the 1990 March of the Living. And this is what she wrote in 1990. Falling. It is so hard to be coherent about Majdanek. It is still too raw for me to worry about punctuation and sense. Some days it would seem as if I'd never gone. Others, like today, I neglect my work to read books about the Holocaust, to go over my pictures and to cry. It seems that if Majdanek was real, school and society as a whole should not be. What happened during the show wasn't okay, and there's so few words that we can use to comfort each other. Our language rings hollow when we try to form sentences. We detract from the feeling of the shoes that we caress through the grates and the courses of the soil in Treblinka as it ran through our fingers. I have given up any hope, any pretense of understanding. All I know is this, at Majdanek, I was terrified of falling into the ashes. That's Lisa Grushko, age 15. If you read the Canadian Jewish News, you will see in the first page of the Canadian Jewish News, often Rabbi Lisa Grushko is discussing important issues with Rabbi Daniel Korobkin. This is called Resistance Through Writing, and we choose 3 heroines of the Holocaust, all 3 who were martyred. Of course, Anne Frank, her most famous quote is, despite everything, I believe that people are good at heart. And we have Krystyna Watuska. Krystyna Watuska is one of my heroes. She was a Polish Catholic who had a Jewish boyfriend. She was caught by the Nazis and she was tortured and she was beheaded. And they used her body afterwards for medical experiments. What did Krystyna Watuska teach us? In her imprisonment in the prison in Germany, she began a pen pal relationship with her German prison guard's daughter. And these letters have survived. And one of the things she says is, I am a righteous Roman Catholic. I am a dedicated Pole, dedicated to my country. She gave her life for her country. But if any of these identities come in the way of my goodness and compassion, I would give it up in a moment because I'm first a human being. What an incredible idea. We all have identities, and these are all important to us. Jewish, Canadian, sadly for me, a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, that's another story. And these identities are great. But first, our common humanity is what takes precedent. What's a profound lesson this martyr of the Holocaust teaches us? And by the way, just a few years ago, a monument to her honor was opened up in Halle, Germany, and the woman who dedicated the monument was the daughter of the same German person who put her to death. Look how history comes around. And our last little story is about Hannah Senesh. Hannah Senesh, an incredible hero of the Holocaust, was born in Hungary. Bill knows the story very well because his roots are Hungarian as well. She moved to Palestine to help build the Jewish state, but came back to Hungary to fight against the Nazis. She was caught, she was executed November 7th, 1944, but left behind a remarkable legacy of poetry. Her song, Eli Eli, is one of the most beautiful songs, and I'm going to ask Kim to run, one of our first March of the Living people who started the musical program there, to lead us in this beautiful song, Eli Eli, on page 41.